We just heard from Scotty's peers. Now let's welcome in our colleague with NBC Golf, 8-time PGA Tour winner Brad Faxon joining us. Brad, 49 years, we'd never seen a back-to-back winner at the Players. So why was Scottie Scheffler the one to break through?
What was interesting to me in his interviews is I think he may have been the first one or the last one to hear that he was a back-to-back winner. I don't think he pays much attention to what's around him and to his benefit and to his credit. I don't think he's a real history buff for the game. I think he tries to stay away. We know he stays away from social media. But just the fact that he's not paying attention to noise, I think, is a big plus for his game. And what we've seen with Scotty, not only last week at the Players, but the week before at API, when he combines his tee to green, which has been outstanding for several years now, with extraordinary putting, he's going to be a force for a long, long time.
Brad, were you surprised that the putting stroke that he just developed with Phil Kenyon quite recently held up as well as it did under pressure? I know you pay a lot of attention to exactly what guys are working on the greens. What exactly has Scottie Scheffler changed to get from where he was to what he is?
Well, the one obvious is the actual putter itself. He's gone through a couple different putters. From the blade, Scotty Cameron, that he used. Then he went to another different blade, different company, and then to this mallet, some kind of version of a spider with a different neck. He talked in detail about how he took the line off the ball. But I thought the biggest difference to me when I was watching him the last few weeks is the extra half an inch seemed to me to raise him up just a little bit, and where his arms got a little straighter. He was a little bit more upright. And to me, that looked like a better balance in his posture, where it looked to me before the previous weeks, if you had nudged him from the backside and pushed him over, he might have fallen over on his toes. And that might not seem that big a deal, but when you get into the battle, into the heat, you're on your fourth day in a row of playing, and there might be some kind of a physical toll on a person for that long. I think the posture can be a big part of it. And his stroke looked absolutely flawless. And I even made a call yesterday, I think it was on the 13th hole, as he was going to knock in a, 4 or 5 footer. I'm sorry, it wasn't. It was the 11th hole. I knew he was going to make this putt before he hit it. It was a putt from that distance, from 4 feet. It was on 11. I knew he was going to make it before he hit it, and I think he had that same feeling. I think it's a giant transformation that really all the work he and Kenyon did was finally starting to pay off.
Brad, we're having a little deja vu with Scottie Scheffler. Last year at this point, he had 2 wins, including the Players at this part of the schedule. Now he's in the same spot. We have seen Scottie Scheffler put together a magical season just 2 years ago in 2022 when he had 4 wins at a major. What would he need to do this year in the modern era for you to call it a truly dominant season?
Well, he's been the dominant player the last 3 seasons now. And what's remarkable to me is the players were so, envious or impressed by the fact that even though he wasn't putting well, his statistics were poor during this great stretch and maybe sporadic. But now that he's combined some superb putting with his ball striking that's Tiger-esque, I don't see how you really stop this guy. I don't think he goes home and really thinks too much about the fact that he's just won 2 tournaments or he's taken a more commanding lead on #1 player in the world. I think he just goes about day to day. Like he said, if he hadn't won at the API, it wouldn't have changed his Monday, just the amount of texts he might get on his phone. And I don't think a lot of players in the game today can say the same thing.
We haven't seen Scotty's best golf in May, June, and July compared to the dominant Scotty we see February, March, and April. Why do you think that's been the case?
I think that's a good point, and I would say that for a lot of golfers, a lot of PGA Tour players, when you win, particularly when you win early in your career, a lot of times that can be an obstacle going forward. Your expectations get high, you get pulled in a lot of different directions, maybe corporately, opportunities to go play elsewhere around the world. Scotty doesn't seem to have that in his life. It's kind of mysterious why he hasn't played up to his same level after April. But I remember asking Jack Nicklaus once, I needed to. I was playing in the Masters after winning in New Orleans, and I missed the cut. And I said, Jack, I need to play better after winning a tournament. He says, join the club. And I go, join the club? You won 82 times. You had so many chances. He said, defending a championship is hard. You get all this attention taken away. And I just think this is one of those building blocks for Scottie where there's no way, going forward, I see him not playing well after the month of April, after the Masters, and where he wouldn't contend every week he plays.
So we've got a dominant number one, Brad. What do you make of number two, Rory McIlroy, right now? He won early in the year to start a season in Dubai. This was his first top 20 finish in 5 PGA Tour starts this year, and even that was just a T19. Does it all seem a bit sloppy to you right now?
Yeah, it just shows the fickleness of this game in a way, because when he played at the Cognizant down here at the PGA National, which is a tough driving course, and then at Bay Hill, he was number one off the tee. He found something with that lower tee height, and it seemed like he was driving it just as far and hitting it fairly straight. And then lost a little bit of his iron game at Bay Hill and came to the Players as a guy that, hey, you have to watch out for him. He's making some birdies. He putted superbly the last 3 days at Bay Hill. And as the irons got a little bit better, as he worked very hard early in the week, really on his own with Harry Diamond and his own TrackMan, the driver kind of went awry. And, when you're off just a little bit at TPC Sawgrass, a lot of things can go funny. It can affect your confidence. And even for the best players in the world, something like that happens. And I know it's bothering Rory. I know he wants to figure this out so that he can make this great run up to the Masters like he's planning. So he's got, a couple of weeks off to work on his game, work on his swing. He's going to go play the Valero Open before he goes to play at the Masters, which is a new strategy that I think is a good strategy for Rory.
Fax, I guess being off just a little bit wasn't necessarily unique to Rory McIlroy at the Players. You could say that for Wyndham Clark for a good chunk of the final round. Misses that short eagle putt on the second. Another short par putt miss on the 10th. What did he show you those last 3 holes coming up just short in defeat?
There was some incredible golf. And I have to say, finally, NBC got a very compelling tournament or championship to watch down the stretch in the last 5 events that we've done. And Scottie Scheffler knew he had to shoot a very low score to catch those guys. And I know Brandel did a beautiful piece on Live From about how difficult it is to hold the lead there at TPC Sawgrass. And, both, Schauffele had a lot to prove, hadn't won in a couple of years, needs a big title like this. And what I really call the 5th major, I heard that phrase thrown around a lot. And I think that'd be a good name for the Players Championship, the 5th major, because of the strength of the field and the golf tournament being the same week every year in March. Wyndham Clark struggled with his putter. Schauffele struggled with his putter, both not being as positive with the putter and the speed that they were hitting putts. And down at the very end, when they were finally having to chase the lead rather than hold on to the lead, it seemed like their mindset changed a little bit. Both hit incredible iron shots into the par 5 16. Both left those putts short. Both fired it closely. The 2 best shots of a twosome we saw all day at the very fickle 17th, which was the hardest golf course on the course on Sunday. And, Clark made a good putt there. It was incredible to watch. I think Schauffele hit a pretty good tee shot that ran through the fairway on 18 with some surprise with that adrenaline. And that poor lip out for Clark was hard to deal with because he did everything he needed to do on 18 to give a chance. But for Scottie Scheffler sitting on that practice range, dodging 3 bullets in a row, with Harmon having the chance as well, was very, very dramatic.
You said, Brad, it was a compelling finish on Sunday. There's still some compelling news on Monday. We've learned that PGA Tour player directors are in the Bahamas with John Henry, who you know from the Fenway Sports Group, and potentially representatives of the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund. Do you sense there's a lot of interest or trepidation among the rank and file members at what might come out of this meeting, for better or worse, in their mind?
Yeah, I'm sure, depending on what side of the fence you're on, there's a lot of players trying to figure out what's going to happen. I listened to Rory's comments in his presser last night, talking about the complexities of all this. You know, SSG, John Henry going down there, probably with a few members of his team, are trying to convince Liv, Piff, Yasser, all those guys, how do we get this together at a faster rate? I know there's contracts with the Liv players going out to 2029 or 30, and I think there's players you saw, probably heard Lucas Glover's comments about how he doesn't like these smaller, stronger fields. You know, from a spectator's point of view or a broadcaster's point of view, I mean, watching these signature events with bigger names is really kind of fun to call and fun to watch. But at the same time, there has to be a pathways forward for the players that are out of that top 70. And I know there are with the Aon different ways you can get on there and playing well in the non-signature events. There's just a lot that needs to be done and needs to be done quickly. And I think, Eamon, the two biggest issues are the players that stayed with the PGA Tour, particularly the policy board members like Patrick Cantley and Jordan Spieth. If the Liv players are allowed back to play on the PGA Tour, is there going to be a cost to that? How is that going to be managed? And I think that's a huge issue going forward, never mind all the government regulations with the SEC that the PGA Tour has to deal with.
Definitely something to track in the future as far as what the unwind process would look like going forward. Rory had some additional comments in which he said that he felt that Greg Norman and Liv kind of did a disservice to what the public investment fund's true aims are when it comes to the game of golf longer term. Can you really separate those two when it comes to these negotiations, Fax?
Well, I think that's why we all love to listen to Rory McIlroy, is every time he gets a microphone in front of him, he says something. And there was a huge pause before he said what you just said to me about the selection of Greg Norman for their CEO. He was always a divisive player on the PGA Tour, particularly after his try back in 1994 to create a world tour back then without the support of the PGA Tour or Arnold Palmer or Jack Nicklaus. So Rory's probably correct in that. I know that all the players are on the Live Tour would be sitting watching that Players' Championship going, why can I not play in that? And I think they're missing what the brand the PGA Tour brings worldwide now in the best competitions in the world at some of the most memorable golf courses.
On that point, Brad, there was some sentiment earlier in the week that the Players' Championship was diminished because Jon Rahm isn't there or Brooks Koepka isn't there. The kind of guys who are serious top stars who can play in major championships can't play in a PGA Tour event. Do you subscribe to that idea that the tournament was in any way worse off for their absence?
I don't think people are not turning on the Players' Championship because Jon Rahm isn't there or Brooks Koepka isn't there. Certainly it's not as strong as a field. I think I counted 9 of the top 50 players in the world, or maybe 60 players in the world that are with Liv weren't in that field that could have been had they chosen to stay with the PGA Tour. And their argument would be the opposite if, you know, the tour had been cooperative and let them play. But I'm sure, Eamon, that those players on the Live Tour know that their choice now was really for the money grab and not for really anything else.
Certainly how it's unspooled thus far, but more to be determined with these ongoing negotiations. He is Brad Faxon with NBC Golf. Thanks for joining us, Fax.